When you're looking for a new top laner to main, or even just a new champion idea for your montage, look no further than the Darkened Blade himself, Aatrox. Aatrox is such a common champion to see your autofail top laner lock in because of exactly that. He's flashy, he has resets to carry fights, and the kit is just so fun to play. In this guide, we'll be covering all the important details you'll need to know if you want to start climbing with Aatrox. After this guide, you won't really need to look at any others. But before we get into the video, in the description below, you'll see a quick rundown of the video sections. I'll list them first so you know what's coming. First, we'll cover Aatrox's champion identity and where he fits among his counterparts in the top lane. Then, we'll review his abilities, optimal runes and builds, best combos and helpful tips, lane matchups, ideal synergies, and general playstyle in each stage of the game. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Let's start with champion identity. Aatrox is meant to be that stunning champion that will gravitate people towards the top lane. One thing you need to know about Aatrox before you pick him up for the first time is that his kit is quite complex and quirky to the untrained eye. Once you pick up a dozen games or so, then it starts becoming second nature. A lot of what makes Aatrox stand out from the crowd is that the way you can truly tell a good Aatrox from a great Aatrox is if the player has rhythm. That's right, the way his abilities intermingle all involved incredible opportunities to showcase your skills with the right timing. All of his abilities have some unique interactions with others that involve appropriately timing one ability after the next depending on the situation. With a modest investment into this champion, you'll realize how simple the overall concepts of the champion are and how straightforward a lot of the decision making is. But don't get it twisted, that doesn't really mean he's easy. Only the best can truly push Aatrox's design to the limits and truly be the world ender he was meant to be. Let's start with his passive, Deathbringer stance. Aatrox's passive promotes his next basic attack to deal bonus physical damage and heal him based on the target's maximum health after a moderate cooldown. Moving on to his Q, Aatrox smashes his sword, dealing physical damage in up to 3 separate strikes. The first deals damage in a line, with the end portion dealing bonus damage and knocking up the enemy. The second deals damage in a cone, with the end portion also dealing bonus damage, but in a much larger area. The third deals damage in a circle around him, dealing bonus damage and knocking up enemies in the center of the AoE. Each of these 3 strikes deals increasingly more damage. The Darkened Blade is always going to be the first ability you max. It's crucial to use this as your main source of damage in lane, to remember that it's your only real source of damage from a modest range. The cooldown on this ability is quite low, and remember Aatrox is a resourceless champion, so you shouldn't really be afraid to use it more frequently. Be careful though, because when it is on cooldown, you will not be able to really trade at all. There is a brief period after casting any of your 3 swings of Q where you can use Umbral Dash to manipulate your character model, and as a result, the knockup area of your Q cast to almost guarantee your Q knockup will hit. It's very important to make good use of this, as it is the bread and butter that differentiates good Aatrox players from great Aatrox players. Moving on to Aatrox's W, Infernal Chains. This sends a skill shot slowing the first enemy hit for a short period of time. During that slow, a box is channeled around the enemy where the enemy must escape the box before the time runs out, otherwise they will be pulled back to the center and damaged again. This ability is crucial to Aatrox because it can really easily burn flash off of enemy carries, and when the chain pulls them to the center, it basically gives you an opportunity to know exactly where the enemy champion will be for a moment of time to line up an easy Q. This is a key feature to Aatrox combos, so to master Aatrox, you'll need to master the timing of Infernal Chains to create your own CC chain. Aatrox's E is Umbral Dash. The passive of this ability grants Aatrox Omnivamp against champions that increases while using your ultimate. The active of this ability simply dashes Aatrox in a target direction. This ability not only allows Aatrox to maneuver around terrain to make for quicker rotations around the map and avoid enemy vision, but it also acts as a basic attack reset. When taking down towers, you can use a basic attack, E, and basic attack again. More importantly, you can cast Umbral Dash during the animation of any of your 3 uses of the Darkened Blade, as mentioned before. Getting comfortable with the distance of the dash and doing the quick math in your head to line the knockup acts as an almost guaranteed knockup. You can use this in combination with your flash to close a distance and get on top of an enemy in the blink of an eye. Don't forget that this is really your only gap closing ability aside from flash. If your flash is down in lane, it's important to keep an eye on windows where the enemy jungler could be ready to gank you, and make sure you don't waste your Umbral Dash for a little chip damage. It could result in your life. Now onto World Ender, in which Aatrox gains movement speed, attack damage, and increased healing for a short duration. Takedowns on enemy champions extend this duration and reignite the burst of movement speed. This is always a valuable tool to chase down enemies, but more importantly, once a fight has been committed, this ability provides incredible stat value. Your primary goal should be to use your ultimate when a fight is fully committed and you need the extra bit of movement speed to get onto a target and lock them down with your abilities. If successful, it will result in a takedown and your ultimate stat buffs will recharge, allowing you to snowball the fight. In lane, don't forget that the added movement speed can make or break your chances when getting ganked. If you don't have Flash and Umbral Dash up, or you have already used them to get out of a gank but need more to ensure your safety, World Ender could do the trick. If you watch pro players, you'd notice that as soon as they find themselves in a tricky situation with a gank impending, if they believe they can make it out, the first thing they will do is use their ultimate. The point of this is to ensure that they can take advantage of the added move speed to further move back towards safety before the jungler intervenes, and to help with dodging enemy skill shots. This method also allows them to hold onto their Umbral Dash to use it to potentially dodge crowd control skill shots where traditional movements won't do the trick or are just too risky. Finally, remember that while it sucks to use your ultimate defensively, it's still a much lower cooldown than your Flash. If using one or the other will get you out of a sticky situation, use World Ender first and not your Flash. Now, touching on runes and items. As of right now, Aatrox's rune options are relatively limited, but it's for a good reason. Conqueror just works really well on this champion. Aatrox uses his abilities frequently and weaves in basic attacks often, making Conqueror stack really quickly. With Conqueror, Aatrox should take Triumph to help with the sustain and resetting when in teamfights with World Ender, Legend Tenacity to help break through CC on front lines of the fight, and of course, Last Stand. These options in the precision tree make for a full house in Aatrox's hand in the mid to late game. As for secondary runes, in the Resolve tree, you'll want to run Second Wind or Bone Plating, and Revitalize. These help Aatrox add a little more to his bulkier side while still complementing his sustain. In terms of the build path, items are something that's going to always change depending on the patch, as Riot is really aggressive with changing them, but I'll just still provide some options for you right now. As of the time of this video, great options are items like Eclipse, Duskblade, Gore Drinker, Stride Breaker, and just overall big damage AD items. Aatrox really likes items like Serilda's Grudge as well, because this allows him to secure slows in order to line himself up for subsequent Qs. In terms of other situational items, Aatrox can be looking at things like Death's Dance, Black Cleaver, Sterix Gauge, GA, and Maw. Any combination of items like this, depending on the game, will make for quite the punch and help Aatrox be an absolute menace in side lane and in teamfights. Now let's move to combos. The most important combo that Aatrox players need to get a firm understanding of mechanically is the Q into E repositioning combo. It will take a while to get used to the right angles to use to ensure this knockup, but the key part to being a great Aatrox is landing them for insane damage numbers. A great example of using the full kit to its extent is to R for the burst of movement speed to land the first Q knockup. Then, immediately W and Q for the second knockup. If timed right, then Aatrox can channel his final Q in E on the head of your enemy. This combo is nearly impossible to avoid without a dash or a flash, so it's a great way to pick someone off if you know these are on cooldown. A helpful trick to keep in mind is that your Umbral Dash is not just for repositioning to land your Qs, it also acts as a basic attack reset. Keep this in mind when you're taking down turrets or need that extra bit of a basic attack range when you know your Q won't quite do the trick. Let's touch on matchups slightly. Aatrox, like most Bruiser and Juggernaut top laners, struggles into ranged and bulkier stat checking champions, so consider things like Vayne and Quinn top, or champions that are very aggressive and can get into Aatrox's face, so things like Aurelia, Fiora, Camille come to mind. Anything that prevents Aatrox from hitting his sweet spot and gives a lot of pressure on him in lane can give him a lot of problems. On the contrary, he traditionally picked as a really great tank shredder into things like Shen, Ornn, and things like that nature. Because he's able to hand his sweet spots relatively easily, and since he's resourceless, he can really trickle down and win side lanes against champions like this. Let's talk early game real quick. At level 1, Aatrox is exceptionally strong with his 3 Qs. Landing all 3 on an enemy will almost guarantee you've won the lane. Just don't let the power get to your head though, because Aatrox tends to have a really bad trough a little bit before level 6. If you're not careful and you fall significantly behind, even when you hit level 6 and beyond, it might not be enough to really recoup this loss. You should aim to trade with your enemies whenever possible, as long as the trade is neutral or favorable. Remember that Aatrox is resourceless, so the only con to spamming your abilities is that after you use them, they will be on cooldown and you will have a window of vulnerability. Luckily, the cooldowns of Aatrox's basic abilities are not too long, so the window for opportunities for the enemy are not too crazy. If you're using them effectively, they are also using their abilities in trading and won't have anything up to take advantage of your cooldowns. Your passive will also heal you periodically with basic attacks that are greater when used against an enemy champion, so if you can, try to use that timing with your trading when you can weave in a basic attack to deal more damage to them and heal you as well. This will help tilt the trade in your favor. The mid game as Aatrox can be insanely fun. With the smallest of leads quickly allowing you to snowball into things like Serrated Dirk or Eclipse, you can choose to roam around the map to help your teammates out, or even continue on the charge in the top lane drawing pressure from your enemies. At this point, if you have a significant lead with a level or two, you might even find yourself 1v2ing or even 1v3ing against enemies as well. You'll also want to use your presence in the mid game to overwhelm enemy carries. Since most carries are ranged, you'll need a different strategy to lock them down than just walking up to your Q range. In these scenarios, try using your Umbral Dash immediately, followed up with Infernal Chains to slow the carry, and line up with your Q1 based on where they run. If they manage to dodge your Q1, they will still likely be within the box of Infernal Chains, which will pull them back to the center, while you can line up the sweet spot of Q2 and proc your passive basic attack to deal significant damage and put you within arm's length of the enemy carry. At this point, it's up to you to stay on top of them to land the Q3, or to combo it with Flash to ensure you get that critical damage onto a squishy enemy carry. In the late game, at this point in the game, it's all about being the biggest nuisance to the enemy carries while not overextending yourself. You need to live long enough so that you can get your ultimate reset, and you can continue thrashing about behind enemy lines and making the enemy carries wish they never queued up for another game. To be the most value for your team, you'll want to keep an eye out for opportunities to flank the enemy and follow up immediately after your teams engage. You don't really have too much engage yourself, so don't really waste your time running in head first, as you'll just get kited or bursted completely down before you have a chance at a fair fight. Overall, Aatrox is a top lane champion that will always provide a ton of pressure onto the top side of the map that can make for several opportunities across the map for his teammates. Mastering Aatrox requires a lot of patience, both in learning his mechanics inside and out, and in terms of using his abilities in game to not get too far ahead of yourself. Don't rush. You need to remember to keep the rhythm in mind, and your combos will be smooth like butter. If you can remember to do that, your presence will be felt across the entirety of the Rift. After all, you are a world ender for a reason. I hope this guide has helped you out, and I will see you in the next one. Stay fresh.
I am oblivion. I am destruction. I am